Alien Dean announced. Humans crumble under stress. Maya blinked exactly 0 times. The Grand Academy of Unified Species held its reputation on crushing cadets until they cracked. The Dean, a towering being with translucent skin that pulsed like living crystal, had repeated for centuries that humans were delicate creatures, soft-boned improvisers who only succeeded when luck was generous. Yet here was Maya seated in the examination chamber. Pulse steady, hands relaxed, eyes wide and fixed on the swirling projections above her head. Around her, alien students shifted uneasily in their seats, whispering in clicks, hisses, and tones that only their kin could hear. The room's pressure had been increased to simulate the interior of a collapsing asteroid mine. Gorses tugged at their bones. The holographic timer ticked down. One by one, other cadets blinked rapidly or clutched at their chairs. But Maya sat still, breath slow and controlled like she had been born to swim in gravity wells. The Dean leaned forward, luminous fingers clasped. Human, he rumbled. You do understand that this is not a test of reflexes, but a trial of mind and spirit. Your species cannot withstand what is coming. His words were meant to break her concentration, but Maya only tilted her head slightly, as if considering a question on a quiz. Pressure is just numbers, she said softly. Numbers don't scare me. The murmur that rolled through the auditorium was like wind tearing through glass reeds. A feathered cadet behind her stammered. How is she not faltering? A crystalline one answered. Humans should collapse after one cycle, but Maya wasn't collapsing. She remembered her grandmother's stories of sailors back on Earth who would dive beneath crushing waves with lungs that burned, holding fast until they rose again into light. She imagined herself one of them, and suddenly the pressure chamber felt like an ocean, not a fen. The Dean gestured and that chamber shifted again. Heat seared through the air, then cold, then simulated vacuum. Alien students winced, flinched, and some even withdrew. Mia adjusted her posture slightly, shoulders rolling back. She breathed once, twice, steady as a mountain. The Dean's voice echoed. If you blink, you admit your species is brittle. Then I won't blink, she replied, her gaze fixed on him. That length should have been impossible. No being at the academy had lasted beyond the 7th variation of the trial records showed collapses, fainting, screaming, retreat. Yet Maya passed the 7th, then the 8th, by 10th. The audience was silent save for the low hum of the simulation. She saw alien eyes widen, mandibles twitch, feathers shiver. They had expected a human to be curious, perhaps bright, but never enduring. The silence pressed heavier than the simulated gravity. But Maya didn't blink. At last, the simulation darkened and reset. Second down ended. She sat still. Then Shesmul the Dean rose slowly, light cascading from his frame. Explain, had demanded, though his tone had slipped from triumph into something else, unease. Maya met his gaze unflinching. Where I'm from, pressure makes diamonds. I thought you'd know that, seeing you're made of crystal. The room erupted, not in laughter, but in shock, as aliens realized the human had turned its Dean's own nature into a lesson. Instructors whispered in their native settings, unable to deny the demonstration. For the first time in a long history, the Academy had witnessed a human who refused to yield to pressure. Maya stood calmly, brushing visionary dust from her Academy uniform. She didn't blink, even as cameras swiveled, recording the moment for all cadets scattered across allied systems. The Dean studied her insolence, a glimmer of something enradled across his luminous features. For centuries, the Academy's motto had been simple. Pressure reveals weakness. But now, as the echoes of Maya's words lingered, many wondered if something else entirely. She turned toward the rows of cadets, her voice carrying across the chamber. So, she said, what's next? The Dean's jaw tightened, and with a slow wave of his crystalline hand, a new set of simulations began to arise. The test wasn't over, and Maya knew it. This was only the beginning. The chamber lights flared again, and the walls rippled as though liquid metal was being stretched across invisible wires. The second round had begun, harsher than the first. Calibrated for cadets who had already proven their bodies could endure crushing stress, Maya could sense the tension in the air, not just from the machinery, but from the other students who remained. They had seen her unshaken performance in the first trial, and now every twitch of her eyelid was biomeasured by a dozen alien eyes. The Den spoke again, voiced like resonating crystal chimes. Round 2 will push beyond what your fragile biology permits. Do you understand? Perfectly, Maya replied, adjusting her seat like she was settling in for a longer lecture. The Dean's crystalline body flickered in frustration. The first phase of the second round unleashed its free chaos. The walls projected storms of data, millions of symbols flashing in patterns designed to overwhelm neural pathways. Alien cadets clutched their skulls, mandibles and claws curling in distress as their minds drowned in a flood of unsolvable equations, distorted sounds, and chaotic light. Maya closed her eyes, not in defeat, but in focus. She imagined she was back in her childhood bedroom where a glow-in-the-dark stars had been pasted on the ceiling. She had trained herself as a girl to recite constellations while her younger brother tried to distract her by shouting random words. This was no different, just louder, faster, brighter. She opened her eyes again, calm, and spoke a single word. Next, gasps rustled through the crowd. Ivan Dean tilted his head, surprised she hadn't buckled. Phase 2, Aravadan Statly. The air thickened with simulated toxins, an artificial atmosphere meant to force cadets into Pinacindus hyperventilation. Breathing was monitored, and anyone who got too quickly would trigger disqualific. Maya slowed her lungs, remembering the swim coach who had taught her how to glide underwater for long laps. She took measured breaths, each one like an anchor beside her, a reptilian cadetist vigilante, chest heaving before collapsing against the restraint. One by one, seats emptied as more students failed. Maya didn't falter. The dean narrowed his radiant tires. You cannot endure all levels. Nobbing has guess I'll have to be Thea first, Maya answered. The final phase of round 2 began with silence. Thea, the light, the floor, everything was gone. She found herself floating in a simulated void, sensory deprivation. No sound, no sight, no time. For most cadets, this was the cruelest stage where the mind began to devour itself. Loneliness cracked their spirits, and the emptiness gnawed until they begged to be released. Maya knew what they wanted. Isolation would break her, yet she smiled in the void. She thought of Earth, of campfires with her friends, of her mother singing old songs while cooking dinner, of laughter echoing through thin walls. She carried those voices in her chest, and no Massini could take them from her. You can't scare me with nothing, she whispered into the void, and then light. The audience saw her sitting calmly in her chair, heartbeat steady, eyes unblinking. But Dean had expected her to be trembling or disoriented. Instead, she looked refreshed, as if she had been napping through the ordeal. Phase complete. In tone, the exam system, the scoreboard lit with her dynamic limbing higher and higher, surpassing dozens of species that had dominated the Academy's rankings for generations. Alien cadets stared at her with wide eyes, some with fear, some with awe, and a few with envy so sharp it cut through their composure. Whispers carried across chamber. How is it possible? Humans, they were supposed to be weak. Sheeting, she must be. Maya ignored them. She rose slowly from her seat, stretching her arms as though she had been sitting through a long shuttle ride. Her calmness was more dangerous than any boast. The dean called her forward. She approached the resid platform where instructors of mod sat in judgment, their bioluminescent robes flickering as they exchanged hurried signals. Human cadet, the dean thundered. Your performance exceeds expectations, but the true test lies ahead. Round 3 is no tenderness, it is choice. Choice, Maya asked, tilting her head. Indeed, not all pressure comes from weight or heat. Some comes from decisions that crush entire civilizations. If you fail here, you will prove the Academy's principle that your kind breaks when burdened with. The floor split open, revealing a vast holographic arena. Cities bloomed across the projection. Fleets maneuvered. Alien banners waved in digital skies. It was a war scenario scaled to galactic proportions. But tests would not merely measure survival, but judgment. You will command, the declared. You will bear the weight of. As the audience hushed, some trembling in excitement, others dreading what would unfold. Maya stepped into the projected battlefield and the simulation locked around her like armor. She stood at the helm of a massive flagship, its controls waiting for her command. Across void fleets of alien warships assembled, coded into the simulation but operated by real cadets who had been tasked to oppose her. Every order she gave would decide outcomes, alliances, and casualties within third official war. The dean's voice boomed above it all. Let us see what happens. Sean, a human, carries the galaxy on her shoulders. Maya gripped the console, eyes scanning the fleets. Her lips quirked into the faintest smile. All right, she murmured. Time to play. She didn't blink. The flagship's bridge expanded around Maya, a domed command chamber filled with holographic star maps, fleet readouts, and tactical overlays. Dozens of glowing icons pulsed across the expanse, each one representing fleets commanded by cadets of other species. They were watching her, waiting for the human to stumble. The dean's words still rang through the chamber, resonating like a challenge carved into stone. Humans break when burdened with consequence. Maya spread her back and let her eyes roam across the battlefield. The Warshan area was brutal by design, resourceware limited, allies untrustworthy, and the very move carried the weight of life simulated in real time. Alien cadets across the academy connected their comments into the network, directing fleets that were programmed to resist her at every turn. The test was meant to overwhelm her judgment, to drown her in impossible choices until her mind fractured. Maya took a slow breath. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's see how this game is played." The first move came swift and sharp. A reptilian cadet, a preemptive strike sending 3 destroyer squadrons straightward Mia's position. The holographic readout flashed warnings, urging retreat, but Mia leaned forward, studying the patterns of movement. They were too rigid, too linear. She smirked. "He's overcommitting." She issued orders to split her fleet, half retreating while the other half looped wide in a flanking maneuver. Alien students, watching from Thirdatorium, gasped when her ship, the reptilian fleet, entrapped them in a pincer, cutting them down with surgical precision. The dense crystalline fingers tightened, but Hesed humming. The next challenger was subtler. A feathered cadet disguised her movements as defensive, slowly building forces while feeding false signals into the tactical network. Mia's with misleading data, entire fleets vanishing and reappearing across map. Most cadets would have been lost in the fog. But Mia remembered nights playing chess with her father. Would deliberately bluff with unguarded pawns just to see if she could see through him. She focused not on what feathered cadet showed, but on what's concealed. "There," Maya whispered, pointing to a patch of empty space. She directed a scouting squadron to sweep it. The crowd erupted when the hidden fleet was revealed. Caught mid-ambush, Maya didn't hesitate. She drove her forces forward, scattering the feathered cadet's armada before it could strike. One by one, challengers fell. The insectoid cadet tried swarming tactics, but Maya recognized the predictive Lee cycles encountered with welty and retreats. A crystalline cadet attempted brute force, deploying massive cruisers, but she danced around them with nimble corvettes, striking supply lines instead of warships. Each time she won, the Tatorium felt quieter. The cadets had marked her species, whispered of human fragility, but now they stared as their scoreboard placed her name, higher and higher, until it stood alone at the top. Then the dean himself entered. The simulation, the air in the chamber seemed to thicken as his vast flagship appeared on the holographic field. A luminous titan that dwarfed every other ship. His voice echoed through Thebotofield like thunder. "Enough tricks, not enough luck. Show me if your kind can stand against certainty." His fleet moved with terrifying precision, a flawless array of shafts cutting through space in perfect unity. Every move Maya madweighed, the dean countered instantly, as though he already knew her decisions. Her fleet began to shrink under their relentless advance, the edges of the holographic battlefield collapsing into ruin. Alien cadets leaned forward, sensing the moment of human collapse at last, but Maya didn't falter. She studied the dean's perfection, the rigidity of his formations, the flawless. She remembered something her grandmother once told her when they played cards. Perfection is predictable. That thought ignited a spark in her mind. She began to issue strange chaotic orders, splitting fleets into odd angles, feinting attacks with ships. She immediately withdrew, scattering forces in ways that looked like madness. Thedian's formations adjusted, countered, crushed each piece of the puzzle. But he realized too late what she was doing. The chaotic moves had drawn his flagship forward, separated from its support lines, exposed just long enough. "Now," Maya whispered, slamming her hand onto the console. Her scattered squadrons converged in a wild, unorthodox strike, surrounding the dean's flagship like a storm of knives. It was reckless, dangerous, complete lion script, and it worked. The holographic titan cracked, light spilling across the battlefield. Thedian's vessel dissolved into The auditorium erupted in shouts, voices shouting in disbelief as Thene's perfect record shattered in front of them all. The simulation ended. The lights of the chamber returned, and Maya stood at the center, her breath steady, her eyes still unblinking. Thedian loomed above her, radiant form dimmed, silent for a long moment. At last he spoke, voice lower than before. "You should not have won, but I did." Maya replied simply. The audience of cadets scolded not look away. They had bewanted that pressure, revealed weakness, that humans would break, but this die showed something else, that humanist thrived under pressure, turned it into strength, and outwitted even the most flawless of opponents. The dean slowly lowered his head, the gesture carrying the weight of reluctant respect. "The Academy will remember this day. He in the galaxy will remember that a human endured what none of us could. Their chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on Maya. She stepped down from theplatform.com, collected, not once blinking, and with that, the test was complete. The motto of the academy would never be spoken the same way again. Yet the silence that followed was not empty. One by one, cadets of every species leaned forward. Their expressions caught somewhere between awe and fear. Some whispered of the advantage her kin might hold if more humans entered the academy. Others muttered warnings that the humanity's rise would disrupt carefully balanced orders. But amidst the chatter, one insectoid cadet stood and clattered its limbs, together in what it specialized as applause. A feathered alien followed, wings spreading and reluctant acnid. Soon, the room was filled with the unsteady sound of respect that no one had ever expected to for a human. Maya did not raise her arms in victory, nor did she bow. Cheyenne turned, scanning the faces of her classmates, her calm expression. You said pressure reveals weakness, she told them, her voice carrying clear and strong. But pressure also reveals who adapts, who endures, who changes the game instead of playing it. That's what it means to be human. Her words sank into the chamber, and even those who had mocked her early found themselves unable to respond. Thedian's crystalline form pulsed once with light, not of anger, but often wedding. Maya walked toward the exit, every step echoing across the still chamber. For centuries, the academy had been a place where humans were considered fragile, unfit for their hardest test of the galaxy. But from that day on, every cadet, every teacher, and even the dean himself would remember the human who never blinked. And beyond the academy's walls, word of her victory would ripple outward, a story told in every star system, a story that reminded them all that under the greatest weight, humanity did not chatter, humanity shone.